founders into companies, into startups. And then over the past 24, 36 months, so a lot of quantitative easing, very low interest rates, capital was looking for yield somewhere. And a lot of that was going to private markets.
Right.
Also, global perception of the continent of Africa was shifting. So people were seeing more opportunity here to back businesses.
Yeah.
So rather than an entrepreneur needing to beg investors,
which is what they used
for a
to
meeting,
do.
which was what they used to do. Sometimes it still happens. If an investor didn't respond within 24 hours with an offer to invest, then they say, well, you're not interested. There are other people who are willing to move faster. So I think it's healthy that we've seen more capital and more interest in African startups, and at the same time, we still think it's very important for there to be strong fundamentals, for people to really understand the businesses that they're building, for the businesses to have a qualified demand for investment capital, and for the investors to really make not kind of short-term trading trade out decisions, but long-term decisions to build, to invest in businesses that are building
long-term value. State of tech in East Africa versus the rest of Africa is what he's going to be talking about, ladies and gentlemen. Let's give Mike Mompi from Enza a hand. Let's go, bro.
Thank you all. So that was the title that was given to me to present. I'm kind of going to present that, kind of not. So my name is Mike Mompi. I'm a co-founder and general partner at Enza Capital, and very happy to be here. So thank you all for joining us. So I've titled this Musings on the State of VC and Tech in East Africa. So as an investor, my bias is going to be coming from the investor side. That's where I spend most of my time. I am an entrepreneur as well, but that is the perspective that I'll be bringing onto East Africa, but also the state of African tech more generally. So thank you to Chris, Ropa, Nathaniel. I know you guys have been grinding hard to put this together. It hasn't been easy. And thanks everyone for joining today. So I just want to start with a quick introduction to Enza. So Enza is a verb. It's Zulu. It means to build, to make, and to create. And we back founders and teams using technology to solve large and meaningful problems across Africa. I'm not sure if I need this or if it's too close to my mouth.
Bring it closer to you so that
closer.
Yeah, because the volume is really high to come. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Tony. And we're a multi-stage venture firm, and we're investing in category-defining companies across the continent of Africa in logistics, financial services, health, human capital, and climate-smart solutions. And then we're investing from pre-seed, so first check into founders and teams, through to Series B. Those early checks tend to be in repeat founders. And we're investing from about $250K to about $5 million on a first check. So that's a brief introduction to Enza Capital. I'm based here with the core team in Nairobi, Kenya. So we're happy to chat with them as well. So there were a few comments on the size of the investment market. I don't want to spend too much time talking about capital, but it is an indicator of activity of maturity of the system. So I will touch on that. In 2020, thank you very much. In 2020, Latin America saw about $4.6 billion of capital invested in the venture ecosystem. Southeast Asia saw about $8.2 billion. And we heard earlier today that I think as of yesterday or by the end of Q3, there was about $4 billion already invested in the venture system on the continent. $4.2 billion is what was invested in 2021. So we're making good progress. There's a lot that's happening. There's activity, and that's encouraging. Now, many of you know, so I'm going to give some of these very generic statistics that everyone knows. By 2050, it's expected that we'll have about 2.5 billion people on the continent of Africa. It's going to be 26% of the global population at that time. It's a lot of people. Now, I'm not sure if you can see this, but why are we sitting down here? This is African venture, LATAM, Europe, Asia, USA. I won't get into the details of the why the numbers are low, but I think what this speaks to is the opportunity. If we have over a quarter of the population on the planet, we have fantastic educational institutions, we have governments who are pushing to see more innovation. We have investors locally and globally who are willing to back and to build businesses on the continent, we know that this is only going to increase. And we have a lot of things that are blowing in our direction. So population growth, 2.5% year on year. Venture funding, 5.2% growth since 2015. Venture transactions, economic growth. So we see that rebounding as well, more swiftly than developed economies. Internet penetration, about 10% annualized growth. And unicorns. We have quite a few African unicorns. So these are private companies that are valued at over $1 billion. Now, I don't think it would be fair to talk about the potential that we have without talking about the headwinds. So macroeconomics, we see debt to GDP ratios rising. We see interest rates increases. We're seeing weakening of African currencies due to quantitative easing, printing of the dollar by the US, and those interest rates going up. And that's going to hurt. And we've seen it take a toll on a lot of our economies already. We're rebounding already this year. And what we do see, this yellow line is emerging economies, and we can put the East African and the African ecosystem more in that bucket. And we will see a bit of a divergence where we will rebound more strongly than a lot of the more developed markets. We are starting at a lower base, so there's a lot more of a way to travel. So this is a map of the ecosystem. So I want to thank the big deal guys, so the two masters. So if anyone wants any of this information or the data, you can get it from the big deal database. I'll speak to Kenya specifically. So number 4, as the hub of the East African ecosystem in terms of venture funding on the continent. But we do know that it's dominated by Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, and Kenya's coming in at number 4. Investment follows innovation and ecosystem maturity and market potential. Now, I want to dive into East Africa a little bit further. So East Africa can be defined in different ways. We talked about the East African corridor. Often it's based on the cities. So you have Nairobi, Kigali, Kampala, and Dar as some of the key cities where we're seeing venture activity, technology activity as well. Not sure if you can see this chart. What I will point out here is that this blue line is venture investment in Kenya, and this one here is Nigeria. So what we saw is that initially Kenya was one of the leaders on par with Nigeria, in fact, in terms of activity. And I speak about investment dollars in venture because it speaks to the technology ecosystem, the maturity, and the potential of those markets. And so we've seen a rebound. We've seen it pass Egypt, South Africa, and I don't know if it's going to reach Nigeria levels, but I'm going to focus on Kenya more than on the other countries in East Africa just because this is where I live. I think most of you are also from here, and it's really the leader in the region. So I want to ask you a question. Average cost of 1 gigabyte of mobile data. Does anyone know what the cost is here in Kenya? Okay, let me ask you a simpler question. Is it higher in Kenya or is it higher in South Africa? Okay, good. Okay, so lower cost of data. So we've got a few things going for us. The Nigerian flag is shaped differently to the other flags. I don't know what the aspect ratio of it is, but it's just slightly different. Disposable income. Higher in Kenya or higher in Nigeria? Sorry? Kenya? Who thinks Kenya? Raise your hand. Who thinks Nigeria? Raise your hand. And so all those people who haven't raised their hands, that means you don't know, or you're too scared to put yourself out there. Well, an interesting stat is that a lot of people look at Nigeria as one of the biggest, most exciting markets on the continent because of the population. But population doesn't necessarily mean market size. How many people in a country of over 200 million have an annual household income over $10,000? Who wants to throw out a number? Tony. Okay, Tony's correct. 1%, about 2 million people. Yeah, you can clap for Tony. Well done. Yeah, fantastic. Disposable income is actually estimated to be higher in Kenya than it is in Nigeria, which actually speaks to a lot of the opportunity because we know that For many African markets, when companies are selling into large populations, the discretionary income is low, which means people are deciding between food, data, transport, family expenses. So that disposable income figure is actually quite important and something to think about. Literacy rates. So that's the Egyptian flag. These are the people who invented hieroglyphics. Excuse me for spitting. Hieroglyphics, right? Early. Which one has a higher literacy rate, Kenya or Egypt? Okay, you guys got the pattern. So 81.5% versus 71.2%. So I want to talk about some of the ingredients that lead to a robust ecosystem. What enables technology, businesses to thrive? What brings investors to an ecosystem? And what can drive outcomes for all the stakeholders involved? So who knows what this acronym stands for? Very famous, very well known. Anyone who's working in technology and venture should know this. It's not, no, I just kind of invented it actually. So talent, mentors, investors, incubators, universities, government, entrepreneurs, big opportunities, and service providers. If you look at any tech ecosystem in the world, they will have all of these elements. And it's not that they will just have these and that they will be sitting there passively, that people will invest and intentionally think about how to maximize talent. How do you bring in mentors? How do you attract investors as capital? How does government set policy that enables a healthy investment environment so we're not scared of intervention, in ways that might be detrimental to the companies that we're building and backing? Who knows what this is? Yes. The beautiful Mount Kenya. So there's other things that I think, I'm going to propose something here, and I think it would be very difficult to have a conference on technology and venture capital in East Africa, specifically in Nairobi, Kenya, without touching on this point. Mount Kenya, beautiful. A lot of people come here for Mount Kenya. The coast, one of the most beautiful coasts in the world. A lot of people come here for the coast. Safari. There was a group of investors yesterday on safari. A lot of people come here for the safaris as well. I'm going to propose something. Now, this is dangerous territory because what is one of the big debates in the technology ecosystem here in Kenya? Anyone? That is definitely part of the debate. I love that this is where the debate is. We have a lot of well-funded, large technology companies that are hiring tech talent, making it more expensive for startups to hire, to attract and retain talent to build the businesses. Any other debates that we see coming up frequently when it comes to funding and venture in Kenya? Yeah? Yeah, okay, good. I love it. Yeah, valuations. It's very expensive, right? And if a valuation is too high at the start, it makes it even harder to return capital, which makes the decision for an investor to back a business even more challenging. Anything else? Yes.
Local versus expatriate.
Oh, no. Okay. Oop, I opened a can of worms. Local versus expatriate founders. Very dangerous for me to actually stand on stage and talk about this. The fact is that it's real. It is a problem. I'm standing here as a Ghanaian who's lived and worked in 4 continents, speaking to a room full of primarily Kenyans, but everyone who's also non-Kenyan, who's building here, who's committed to creating value here and solving problems through business, investment, or through the ecosystem. So I'll share my perspective, a personal view on this debate. The best teams and the best people to solve problems are going to be diverse. We know that globally. We know that knowledge of local context is absolutely critical. If you fly in here from wherever, not necessarily knowing how to build a business and not knowing about the problem, it's unlikely to work. There's a recent example in the ecosystem where we saw that take place. I'm not going to talk the name of the business. However, if you've only ever seen one small market. Let's say you've grown up and spent your life in Mombasa. You've never been to Nairobi. It will be very challenging to build and launch a business in Nairobi. So what do? You partner with someone in Nairobi. What about scaling to Lagos? Very hard to fly into Lagos and to build a business there if you're expanding from Kenya. So one of the things we have seen is local commitment, local context, as well as global perspectives and views of excellence and execution make the best teams. And it's not an either or. Again, sharing a personal view. It's not that we either back locals or we either back founders. We're looking for the best people and the best teams to solve these problems. And that's where the opportunity lies. In the US, of all the unicorns in the market, 55% were founded by immigrant founders. There's something about a perspective that you're bringing into a market without looking from inside out, but outside in. That means you can identify opportunities that might not exist, but building in concert with local insight and talent and otherwise. So I mentioned this point on diversity and collaboration. So important to address this point because this is one of the big nuances of the East African ecosystem. Build diverse teams and collaborate with each other. Very important. One of the things, now a little bit of self-promotion. So at Enza Capital, we saw that this was an issue when it comes to talent. So one of the things that we decided to do was set up a venture fellowship program where we created an online course as well as brought in a lot of the actors in the tech and venture ecosystem across the continent to run a 6-month program for half of the cohort were individuals who never left Kenya, and the other half were people who had direct exposure, access to the continent, to the markets, but who were doing MBAs at kind of Stanford, Oxford, and MIT. And we put everyone together, and they collaborated. They taught each other, they learned from each other, and many of them had ended up in funds and ecosystem providers in the space. Actually, we ended up hiring one of the individuals who came through the fellowship, Eugene. And a little bit more self-promotion. This is the curriculum. So also for anyone who wants to apply to that fellowship, wants to learn more about venture capital, or if you know people who might want to do that, then feel free to let them know. We'll be running the next cohorts, starting it at the end of Q1 next year. So I want to pose a few questions. Now, many of us are here answering these questions. How do we best provide access to working capital for entrepreneurs who make up the majority of our economy? How do we streamline the quality, visibility, and consistency of supply chain for SMEs? How do we finance productive assets for willing workers to generate more income? How do we decrease the friction and related costs of financial transactions in the economy? How do we increase home ownership and quality of life for mortgages? Only 20,000 mortgages since Kenya's independence have been issued. Home ownership is life-changing. You have an asset, you can borrow against it, you can leverage that, you can set up a business. Now, how do we solve these problems? I want to hustle salsa. How do you enable sellers to sell, to engage, to run their business using social media platforms? How do we solve these problems using technology? How do you create transparency and increase appropriate access to higher education and skills development for students across Africa? There's maybe one or two more questions. I could go all day. How do you increase Africa's role in the fight against a global climate catastrophe? For centuries, the continent has been pillaged of its resources. And then we have a global north who is emitting carbon at levels far beyond what the whole of the continent is emitting on a per capita basis, many multiples beyond. Where is the innovation to monetize the natural lands and the maintenance of sustainable agriculture to provide some of that income from the polluters through to the farmer, for example? There are a lot of opportunities that exist, and I think in solving these problems is where we have huge opportunity to build businesses as venture investors to back these problems and ultimately create massive value. And it's important to remember that as humans, we are not thinking machines that feel, we are feeling machines that think. A lot of us start with that feeling. What is the problem I want to solve? And then we apply thought, logic, and strategy to that. And it's hard. I debated whether or not I should make a slide that just says hard. But stay with me. It is incredibly difficult to build successful business. It is incredibly difficult to hire a team, to let people go if it's not working, to decide to shut down a business if you know you're not actually going to be able to make it with that model. It's hard to build a nation. It's hard to solve these problems. But for us, for the entrepreneurs in this room, we know that in solving these problems, in building these businesses, we can build the Africa that is the one that we dream of, the one that we know that can exist, and the one that is very real. Grind. It's a grind. How many here are entrepreneurs? Who's building a business? Okay. Who's an investor? And entrepreneurs, investors, keep your hand up if this is an easy job. Okay. Okay. We've got the LPs in the room. It's difficult, right? And we are deciding to do this difficult work, not because it's hard, but because we're the only ones who can do it. It's a grind, right? And the people who are grinding the hardest in health and wellness and for the Gen Zs out there, don't burn out, don't work too hard. But for those who are grinding the hardest and the smartest, we're actually going to change the future of the continent. We're going to change lives. We're going to change the way that people think about the continent. So last few points. If I think about the ingredients, one of the key ingredients is capital. As a venture investor, yes, we talk about money, capital, venture capital. There's intellectual capital. There's human capital. It's about building people. It's about raising capital to fuel a business. It's about having the insight, the ideas, and the strategy, perhaps from a market or from another market, to grow that organization. And I do want to, maybe not a warning, but one thing we've seen is that people are very driven by press releases. And most of the press about the technology ecosystem in Africa is about fundraisers, which can be exciting. As an entrepreneur, I've raised money from angels and then from a big fund, Oxford Ventures in London, when I was an entrepreneur. And it's exciting. However, we need to ensure that we're not distracted by building businesses to raise capital. Where someone sees an opportunity, they think I can attract capital for this opportunity. We need to raise capital to build businesses. It's a tool, and it's one of many tools, and it's not success in of itself. Few key insights. Entrepreneurs, you'll win if you help people save money, help people make more money, make people's lives easier and higher quality. We've talked about this. Diverse teams deliver better results. Raising money is not equivalent to success. VC is not right for all businesses or models. VC, in terms of the whole market, is a slice. There's debt capital, there's revenue share, and sometimes there's just revenue, building a business on revenue, which is, I think, one of the most exciting ways to build a business, which goes against the whole business side that I run. Population size does not equal opportunity size. We talked about this. High growth startups, what we're seeing, think about cities and not countries. So people are thinking about highly dense urban areas or peri-urban areas rather than reaching a whole country. Selling a business for $10 million is more difficult than raising $10 million. Selling a business is tough. Exiting a business is difficult. Tony mentioned IPOs. Everyone's talking about IPOs. 2% of exits in Africa are IPOs. 23% private equity and financial buyers, 44% trade buyers, 30% private sales and management buyouts. So if your only route is IPO, the probability of that is low based on the statistics. I hope that some or maybe all of you will reach that. We'd be very happy for any of our portfolio companies to IPO. Just bear in mind that is still a very challenging and unproven route to exit. So I'm going to wrap up. I just want to highlight the massive opportunity that exists in solving large and meaningful problems on the continent of Africa. I want to thank all the investors, all the entrepreneurs, all the ecosystem providers, because none of us would be here if it weren't for the entrepreneurs. Investors, I wouldn't have a job. LPs wouldn't be investing in funds. The accountants, the lawyers, the accelerators, none of us would exist if it weren't for the individuals who are really taking that leap and building the businesses. I just love the team. So I just want to put a slide here that shows some of the team. It's all about the people. I'm an entrepreneur. My partner also built and sold a business as an entrepreneur. We know it's all about the people. Our business is about people. The business you're building is about people. And I think if I bring it back to the East African opportunity, we have fantastic people, fantastic human capital, and a lot of opportunity to really, I think, become and maintain as a leader, not just on the continent, but globally. Thank you all. Mike Mompi from Enza Capital, and that's it for me.